Welcome to Proudly Out of Line. I'm Mardi Moore, an old school dyke and the CEO of Boulder-based Rocky Mountain Equality. With everything going on around us in this world right now, it's the perfect time for all of us to be engaged, informed, and hopefully have a little fun along the way. On with the show. Well, we are on the last episode of our first season of Proudly Out of Line with Mardi Moore, your host. It has been such a year, from Congressman Joe Neguse to Alok to Kate Kendall to Simon Fung. The list goes on. I hope you've listened to and enjoyed each one of them. Today, as we close out the first season, I'm really proud of the work we've done and the people we've brought into the studio or onto Zoom to have conversations so we can all have a little fun and learn a lot about the LGBTQ community. Thanks for listening. Spread the word. Let your friends know that you enjoy the podcast, and we'll see you next season. Today in the studio, we are joined by Erin Reed. Erin, yeah, that Erin. The Erin in the morning, Erin Reed. I'm beyond excited for the stimulating conversation and to learn more from Erin and her thoughts about the trans community and the fight we're in and the fight that needs to happen to get back to full equality. Erin, I want to start by reading something that you wrote that starts like this. We aren't losing ground because we've been too loud or too assertive. We're here because the far right dominates the media ecosystem, funnels hundreds of millions into demonizing transgender people, and has cowed Republican politicians into lockstep obedience. The only antidote is to stand firm and lead with principle. Is that how you lead your day?
Absolutely. And I think that so many people could hold this message to heart. I think that, we live in a world where we're told that if we stand up for ourselves, if we stand up for our rights, if we, assert ourselves, that's just going to invite backlash, and that we should try to minimize who we are, that we should try to hide, that we should try to reduce our presence. And I just don't believe that that is, morally or ethically right, or that it's even effective. You know, the people that have been spearheading all of the oppositional sort of attacks against LGBTQ people, and especially in this iteration, transgender people, they're not content with a smaller presence of transgender people. They're not content with us being quiet. They don't want us in their world. And we've seen that. We've seen the money that they spend on demonizing us for being who we are. And I have to believe that we take lessons from the people who came before us. We take lessons from the LGBTQ movement that has come before us, from the teachers that fought to be able to overcome the Lavender Scare, from the people who escaped Nazi Germany. Like, these are people who knew who they were and who made that clear. And I think that we should do the same.
I do too. Thank you. I was doing some reading recently, and they were the writer was talking about how this far right manufactures moral panics, and they referred back to Anita Bryant and Save Our Children, to Florida Don't Say Gay. They could go as far as to talk about QAnon or Pizzagate. These kind of like, oh, it's all about the children. Can you talk a little bit about that thought connected to what we're seeing in real life with legislation and court rulings?
Yeah, I mean, look at 5 or 6 years ago, and the issue around transgender people, it started with sports, and it was just about sports, and that's what they said, that this would all be limited to sports. And then it became, kids in school bathrooms, and then it became kids' medical care. And then it became passports, and then it became all of our medical care. It became, you know, our right to have a picture of our spouse on our school desk. It became our ability to publish an article that includes an LGBTQ person in the school newspaper. I've covered all of these things. Now it's at the point where you can't even perform Shakespeare plays in some states because Shakespeare used gender bending. And I think that it's become eminently clear that this was never about sports. It was never about kids. It was never about bathrooms. Again, it was about there is no level of existence that transgender people can put out there that will be acceptable to those who want to silence us, to those who want to erase us.
Do you think it's based in fear, Erin? What do you I'm like I just try to get some understanding so I know how to talk with people on the other side of the very big fence. Do you have a sense of where it all comes from?
I think it's different for each person. And I
Mhm.
think it's different for which level you're talking about. So, for instance, if you're talking about the far right billionaire money interests, that's a very different conversation than from, your rural grandparents. And I think that, we're dealing with a situation that is not all one thing. Like there are multiple things that are interacting here. So for instance, the billionaires and their sort of group that they've been working together in, they truly believe that we are in a reproductive crisis and that trans people, we harm the future of their workers because we're going to reduce the population. And it's very similar stuff that was levied against gay people back in the 90s, very, very similar stuff. And then some of them are also like truly and fundamentally Christian nationalists that want to institute a new nation that is, under a very particular view of Christianity. And that's sort of their way of doing things. They pour money into these things. But then, you talk about like your rural grandparent or your rural parent who lives out, in a red county. And I think that's less fear and more misunderstanding. We're new to them. They don't quite understand, who we are and how we work. And what I will say is those people I've had enormous success with over time. Like those are the kinds of people that once they get to know you and once they get to understand you, you can make huge leaps and strides in progressing, their acceptance of you. And so, yeah, I think that it's different for each person, and the way that we tackle one is different from the way we handle another.
Thank you. You make me think of two questions, and I hope I can hang on to both of them. The first one is about the national movement. All right. So I'm at Rocky Mountain Equality. We serve about 30,000 people a year from Boulder to the Wyoming border. And we get alerts and invited to conversations with people in DC, in New York, in San Francisco, in LA. And you make me want to ask this question because of what you just said, which is the conversation in Colorado, I think needs to be very different than what a consultant thinks the message should be in New York. And I run afoul of the national movement in that because I will say it out loud. Here I am saying it again. But could you talk? I mean, you write for a living. Can you talk about what you see as a difference in messaging coming from the national movement to those of us who are on the ground?
Yeah, in Colorado, you're dealing with very big local issues that are different from the national issues, that are different from the issues that are felt in red states, that are different from, you know, congressional issues and stuff like that. For instance, I recently reported on your Supreme Court case that ruled that Colorado Children's had to start providing gender affirming care again, and that was something that you know the national movement and movement leaders, especially like organizations, they have not been doing, in my opinion, a great job at like covering the hospital issue and covering how hospitals, even in blue states, have been capitulating to the Trump administration. And I think that one of the successes of the Colorado movement is to say, I don't care what the national orgs are doing or what the national orgs are saying. Like, we're going to put the pressure. We're going to go ahead and we're going to fight. And it worked. It worked in such a great way that now, you know, you've got a hospital system that has to return to providing care again. And I can tell you that I know so many people that moved to Colorado at the beginning of all this Many of them came from Texas whenever the Paxton and Abbott enforcement initiative happened, where they were trying to arrest the parents of trans kids in Texas. And many of those families fled to Colorado. And so, in Colorado, you've got a very unique perspective and a very unique, I would say, um, something that you have to hold to and something that you have to stand to. And I think that honoring that commitment to the trans people that flee to Colorado is a very particular Colorado thing.
It is a Colorado thing. I'm proud to be from Colorado. I in that Colorado, we're a great place. Also, today is the anniversary of Amendment 2 being overturned. The most recent cases that have gone to the Supreme Court, upcoming number 4, St. Mary's v. Roy, preceded by 303 Creative, Masterpiece Cake Shop, and Childs v. Salazar. In your reporting, I'm missing something here. There's a concerted effort in Colorado. First, we have that, and I'm not a big conspiracy kind of gal, but we have that, and now we have these 2 obvious anti-trans. There's another one, but there's 2 obvious anti-trans ballot measures headed our way. In
Yeah.
your reporting, can you inform me about it? Like, I live here and I can't quite figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you want to know like what the ballot measures do, or are you concerned about like who is behind them, et
Who's
cetera?
behind them? We can talk more about what they do, but like, who's behind these, do you think?
Yeah. So, I think that it is the same network that we have seen, and it's almost like a hydra. You've got so many heads to this hydra. You've got the Alliance Defending Freedom and the Heritage Foundation. That's your big money. Those are your organizations that are pouring money into these issues and that are pouring resources into these issues. And then you have all of these local groups that are affiliated and that bring the same people. They bring the same sort of Chloe Cole and Prisha Mosley. They bring, yeah, Leor Sapir. You get the whole sort of ecosystem that they sort of wrap into what they're doing. And then you also have SEGM, GenSpec, but all of these groups were investigated by the SPLC,
The Southern Poverty Law Center.
and it's something called the Captain Report, and it's very much worth reading. The Captain Report essentially looked into all of these organizations and determined that they are basically the same organization. They're sharing the same names, they're sharing the same people, they're sharing the same funding sources, they're all writing on the same letters. And in a way, like you have these little local groups that, not just in Colorado, but very similar stuff is going on in Maine right now. Maine has a similar ballot initiative measure. Something similar is going on in Washington state right now. And, you can think that these are all little local groups, but they're all supported by the same cast of characters and they're all part of the same, general goal. I want to also say that another issue with all of this is like dark money. You have all this money that's pouring into all of these groups and all of these efforts and all of these organizations, and you can't track where it comes from because, our national Republican counterparts up in the Supreme Court for a long time have created these sort of this way in which you can hide, who you're giving money to and where the money's coming from. And so, yeah, I think that they're coming from the same sources, the same billionaire groups like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and your Alliance Defending Freedom and your oil executives. There was, by the way, a recent report a few months ago about how a lot of this is actually climate change and oil money.
Wow.
Yeah, like oil organizations, oil companies, some of the same groups that have been fighting climate change awareness are also the same groups that are giving money to anti-trans stuff.
Wow. That's really helpful. In some of my conversations, so here in Colorado, we're getting ready for the fight. Rocky Mountain Equality has stood up an effort called Hands Off Colorado, where we've been trying to do education for a year, which ties back to an earlier question I forgot, which is when you're talking to rural grandparents, like when they get to know you or another trans person, they're like, "Oh yeah, they're people." Ah, surprise. And there's some thought from some of the more centrist folks. I'm not saying I agree with this, but just trying to put all the pieces together that the trans movement got ahead of itself, uh, much like the gays and lesbians did, until people started coming out, like clearly coming out. Now, gays and lesbians, of course, we have faced violence, but they didn't remove our health care. They didn't try to take our passports. I mean, this is a whole new level. It's not a fair comparison. But do you think there's any truth in that? Be-
I don't, and the reason why, there's a few ways that I can talk about this, but one of the things that I always mention is that what separates this particular movement from other ones is that with the gay rights movement, in many cases, they were looking for the right to marry, a new right, a right that they should have had, that LGBTQ people should have had, but nonetheless, a new advancement. They were trying to push to a new level, and they successfully did that. And we managed to get the right to marry, and that was great. But with trans people, like, we're not pushing for anything new. We're just asking for the same things that we've had for the last 50 years. Like, we've been able to change our gender markers for almost 60, 70 years now. We've been able to play in sports since, 2004. So at least 22 years, we've been able to change our birth certificates and change our gender marker in places like Texas and Florida and Tennessee for decades now. We've been able to use the bathroom in these places. There haven't been any laws against us using the bathroom. So we're not fighting for anything new. We're not asking for society to add on new benefits that we get or anything like that. We're asking to be able to continue to live the same way we've been able to live for decades now.
That is a really great point, and that is going deeply into my brain for my next conversation. Thank
Of
you,
course.
Erin, for that. So let's talk a little bit about the ballot measures we're facing in Colorado. That's one of the reasons I know we were able to cajole you into joining us in this podcast because you have some concern about it. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about 109 and 110 and your understanding of what those measures will do to the kids of Colorado?
Yeah. So, the anti-trans ballot initiatives in Colorado, the way that I understand them, and they're horrifying for the transgender people in Colorado, is that 109 would basically be a sports ban for transgender people. What I will say is that this doesn't only have the effect of banning transgender people from, sports that you might think of as sports. If you have an athletics department, or if you have a intramural department that includes a sport like darts, or a sport like, outdoor long distance camping or something like that, or even chess, we've seen bans on transgender participation in chess. These sorts of ballot initiatives could reach into that. And likewise, every single state where these anti-trans sports bans have come up, you've often seen not just transgender people, but cisgender people get challenged. In Utah, just a state over, basically,
Mhm.
there were two cisgender athletes that were competing. And when they won, another parent got really pissed and really upset and said, "Oh, well, I bet you they're boys." And so it caused like this big investigation. They had to go to the doctor, they had to do all these things. And it was it was not really great for anybody involved. Again, to go back at what I was just saying earlier, um, every single, all of these sports have been handled on a sports by sport level. So, like, some sports require a little bit more hormone therapy over a longer period of time for you to compete. Um, but as it stands right now, if this measure passes, it would essentially remove a transgender person's ability to play on sports with their friends. And then the ballot initiative 110, I believe, is an even scarier one, which would ban gender affirming care in the state for transgender youth, in terms of Medicaid and Medicare funding gender affirming care procedures. And it would affect, the ability of transgender people in the state of Colorado to get medical care. And this is also a really big one because people have traveled to Colorado to obtain gender affirming care. People have moved to Colorado to continue to maintain their gender affirming care. And while 110, I believe, is technically quote unquote surgery only, what this does is we have seen these surgery only bans impact even, they're called in what are they called again? They're the implants. So these are arm implants that you put hormone therapy, and it allows you to go for a long period of time without without having to re-up your dose, or also for puberty blockers, their implants as well. And this is a very common procedure for transgender youth who do undergo gender affirming care. Puberty blocker implants mean that they don't have to constantly take medicine all the time. And it's basically a way that you can also secure that person from the Trump administration, because if you don't have to constantly re-up your medication, having the implant means that you're good for 3 years. You can outlast the Trump administration. And so this would be a major impact on transgender youth in the state there.
Thank you. And I agree. I would add one thing on the sports ban, which is it even includes clubs. So, like, if you were like, well, I'm not going to do high school sports or whatever, I'm going to join a little soccer club. They can be banned there too. So it's so broad. It seems ridiculous.
Yeah,
On the
absolutely.
gender affirming care one, where it does say like chemical mutilation or no surgical whatever the terrible language they use, and I refuse to remember. But then it goes on to list in the bill podiatrists, dentists, psychiatrists, physical therapists, for crying out loud. Like, I don't know any physical therapist that does surgery. And
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
like, what is
Or any psychologist,
right? Well, let's hope not,
or
right?
yeah, right?
And so I just don't quite figure out how this got through our title board, and also what I'm missing in reading of the measure.
Yeah. I don't think you're missing anything. I think maybe one thing that we have seen in other states with these kinds of listings of professions is that it's not just the people that are performing gender affirming care, it's the people that are referring to another doctor. And so they could perhaps make the argument that you have played a part in it by referring to somebody out of state. And that could be a way of like targeting the person who does that.
Thank you for that point of view. I appreciate that. The one that I'm going to bring up the next the 108 right now because of what you just said. Uh, the referrals, the coming from other states. So 108 is another ballot measure. They collected enough signatures. It's on. It's run by the same people, the same signature gatherers, and it's a life sentence for human trafficking. We've watched in the Colorado legislature over the past couple of years, an effort by the Republicans to pass a law that says any parent who's bringing their kid from, for example, Kansas to Colorado for an abortion or for gender affirming care is considered a human trafficker. Now, those have all failed. We've been able to hold a Democratic majority and sane people in our legislature, although 50% of the legislature is up for election this cycle. So it'll be a whole new world come January 1st. My theory, and I need your help on this. My theory is, who's going to say they're against human trafficking? Nobody, right? Nobody's going to say, "Oh, let's traffic people." And so I'm concerned about that one passing.
Mhm.
Because of that. You can argue life sentence, 3 strikes, we're out. People who have been human trafficked become human traffickers. There's a lot of ways to look at it, and we're trying to figure that out. But have you seen in any other state where they've used this human trafficking language to harm parents who are taking their kids to safety?
Yeah, Idaho. Idaho was one of the first states that I saw try to advance a very intense human trafficking law towards transgender people. This was a um, this was a bill that did not end up passing in Idaho, but it passed the House and it almost passed the Senate there, and it would have created life sentences for anybody trafficking their quote unquote trafficking their kids to another state for gender affirming care. And one of the chief sponsors of that bill said that they saw this as just like the abortion trafficking decisions that they were trying to also pass, that these are two sides of the same coin. I believe the quote was that it was like one treats a newborn life and the other is the potential to give a newborn life. And so this was both forms of trafficking that should be hit with life sentences or something like that. And this has been something that we all also seen in aiding and abetting clauses. So in Tennessee, I believe there's an aiding and abetting clause for gender affirming care there. I believe Texas might have one. I'm not remembering just quite if Texas has one, but a number of gender affirming care bans have aiding and abetting clauses, which can be used. We haven't seen them used this way yet, but which can be used to sort of prosecute any parent that takes their kid to go get gender affirming care in another state under trafficking like laws. And so, yeah, this isn't something new. This is something that we've seen. It's also under the same sort of guise as the child abuse stuff that was going on in Texas. Again, the reason why so many trans people fled to Colorado is because they were using laws like that to target the parents of transgender youth with child abuse. And they were going to arrest the parents. They were going to take the kids away. Many families fled Texas because of that. And so this is something that, yes, we have seen this before. And I think that that's an adequate fear. Like, I know that this is going to be enforced by people who run the government in Colorado. And the hope is that Democrats continue to run the government in Colorado, but under the wrong hands, in the wrong hands, we've seen, what an executive can do using vague laws to target LGBTQ people and especially trans people.
Thank you. All right. So I'm not totally off the mark on that. I appreciate that. You made me think of something I think about a lot. We're helping we're in conversations with private gender affirming care clinics that have had to stand up as the systems have been threatened by Medicaid money from the government, Children's, Denver Health. Conditions of participation really kind of took care of them in that ruling or order from Dr. Oz and Bobby Jr. And so private clinics have stood up. But now we have the ruling, as you mentioned, in Colorado that's a parent took uh, the clinic or the hospital to trial. Parent won, the parent and the kid won. We don't know exactly how they're going to open up, when they're going to open up, what that's going to look like. But this going back and forth, opening and closing, I've talked to many a parent who's like, "Oh my God, my prescription's about to run out. I don't where do I go?" Children's closed down pretty quickly without giving prescriptions, a long-term prescription. Denver Health was able to do a little bit more planning in that, but still people are going to different clinics. And
Mhm.
they shut down once before and opened back up. And so now, as a leader in the LGBT community and trying to make sure that people have access to gender affirming healthcare clinics, we have been talking with private clinics. But now they're forced to reopen. And people have to make a living, right? These are
Mhm.
doctors,
Yep.
professionals, there's insurance, there's facilities, there's all those costs. And so this yo-yoing of all of that. I mean, this whole administration has me waking up every day going, "What the heck's gonna happen next?" But living in that little ecosystem, what are your thoughts about the ongoing I know we need research. Research hospitals are great. We need those.
Mhm.
But what do you think it looks like 2 years from now? And 2 years is a long time, and it's actually not a long time if you're someone caught in this trap.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of things to sort of talk about here and a number of things to cover. I think that the hospitals that have shut down the care are part of that problem, that you wouldn't have the yo-yoing if the hospitals just continued to stand up. And I also think that part of that problem, and I've been very, I've put myself sort of out on a limb on this, but it's been something that I have sort of shouted from the rooftops, and that the blue state attorneys general, all of them that are out there that are not enforcing state laws are also causing that problem. You're going to have this yo-yoing if you're not standing firm and making it clear what your responsibilities are for your local hospitals and what they need to do. And in many cases, blue state AGs, they haven't done anything to talk to the hospitals to make them continue to provide that care. And so you're going to end up in a situation where they're going back and forth and back and forth to sort of give you an idea of why this is happening. You know, a hospital is being faced with, potentially losing their funding from a threat by the Trump government. But it's not based on any law. It's based on random executive orders and little conniving that they're trying to do, but it's not based on any particular law. They are just threats. As of right now, not a single hospital has lost funding. Not a single one has lost funding for providing gender affirming care. And there are many hospitals that never shut down. There are lots of them that have not shut down and that continue to provide that care. And so you have these hospitals that are basically afraid of Trump. And then on the blue state side, their AGs are saying, well, we're not gonna enforce our state law. Our state law says you have to continue providing care. You can't discriminate in medical care against trans people, but we're not going to enforce it. So what does a hospital do? A hospital is basically, on one side, it's saying that I'm gonna attack with everything I got. And on the other side, it's saying we're not going to enforce anything. So what the hospital, it's run by lawyers and a board. They're going to say, okay, well then I guess we're just going to comply. Like that's clearly what we need to do. And so I have always been of the opinion that like we have to keep the pressure up on these hospitals because they are going to have to fight in court no matter what. At this point, like they're going to have to fight in court. I would prefer them to be fighting the Trump administration than fighting me. Like, I want them to go out and fight Trump on this. I want them to use their money to fight Trump. I don't want them to use their money to fight Colorado. And so now, because Colorado Children's just lost against in that suit, now they're going to be forced to sue the Trump administration instead of suing Colorado. And so that's a big deal. Like that's a major deal. And I think that's important. Now, as far as 2 years from now, the whole point of this, the whole point of this is to try to make it, like you said, it's people's livelihoods. It's to try to make it to where nobody's going to want to give this care to begin with, because they know that even if we get a Democratic president for 4 years, if we get a Republican one after that, it's all going to start up again. I want to add something too. One of the other solutions that I have brought up repeatedly, and it's something that I'm hoping that Mayor Mamdani in New York does, because he claimed that he would do it, and I'm really hoping he does it, is establishing city provided and state provided hospitals for gender affirming care. So basically, in your state and city hospitals, anything that is funded by the city or state. New York, for instance, has the New York hospital system, which is funded by the city and run by the city. Provide that care there. That way, they have to follow state law, and that way the state can sue the Trump government anytime Trump steps in.
Great solution. I will write that down. I will write that
I
down.
don't now. I will say I don't know if Colorado has a robust public hospital system or not, but I know New York does.
Yeah,
So
yeah. We're losing hospitals. I mean, the big beautiful bill is wiping out our rural hospitals, and we're in a bit of a crisis. The margins for running a hospital are really thin to start with. Um, but I think there may be some ways here and there. Denver Health, for example, I think takes a lot of City of Denver money. I mean, they're funded from a lot of ways. So that's a really helpful idea. I want to jump back to, we've talked about how well the right wing is, the Alliance Defending Freedom, that whole Stephen Miller, Mark Meadows cabal of hate. I don't know anybody on our side doing that work, like defending trans people from the hate that is headed our way. Is there, like, you talked about the captain's report, I think it is. I didn't write it down, but that piece, kind of connected to the money angle. Do you have is there like somebody I'm missing in our side of the world that is working on a national level to stop this?
honestly, it's the trans people themselves, and
That's
this is where it's at. Like right now, it's us. We're the ones. Like you have some orgs too that are also associated with and heavily inclusive of transgender people. So you've got the Transgender Law Center. You've got groups like Lambda Legal. You've got
A
even the ACLU has been.
A4TE.
Yeah, A4TE. You've got major organizations that are supportive of us, but they don't have nearly the war chest as the Alliance Defending Freedom, for instance. And then the other thing I'll mention is that unfortunately, not only do you have the work that not only is there not anybody or not many people doing this work nationally for us on our side, there are people that are working against us on our side. You have your third way Democrat groups that are basically trying to argue that the right way to move forward is to throw trans people under the bus, to throw your constituents under the bus. And I think that that is such a misguided way of handling or talking or dealing with transgender people because number one, we've already talked about there's no amount of capitulation you can do that they won't just move on to the next topic on. We've seen it every time that that Democrats have tried this. But number two, like trans people are part of your constituency. We make up, surprisingly, and I think a lot of Democrats don't really realize this, but we are 1 to 2% of the American public. So that's us. We're 1 to 2%. So that's 3 million to 6 million trans people in the United States, and then about 2% more are non-binary. So add another 3 to 6 million people in the United States that identify as trans or non-binary, and then you've got our family members. I mean, and we all pretty heavily vote left. Like we are a major part of your constituency. And we've seen, one of my favorite things to report on is Democrat that throws trans people under the bus loses their primary. And it seems like it happens every single time. I'm hopeful that Democrats realize that we are a big part of the constituency, that our friends and family are a big part of the constituency, and they need to work to support us, not against us.
Point taken. Yeah, it's a mess. The Democratic Party is a mess.
It can be. It really can be. And again, I don't think that there have been people that have said that throwing trans people under the bus is how you're going to win. That's how you're going to win the election. That's how you're going to do it. And I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that at all. In fact, if anything, we have seen the opposite. We've seen in very recently in Virginia in the governor election and the state election there, they had Winsome Earl Sears spent 53% of her money, it's like tens of millions of dollars on anti-trans ads against Governor Spanberger. And she won by a bigger margin than anybody was expecting. And then Democrats in Virginia ended up with 64 seats in the House. And in those elections, too, they were heavily focused on trans issues because this was what the Republican Party was running on. And I think that people are honestly tired of the idea that you can just keep hitting the trans panic button numerous times, want nonstop, and that it will distract you from all of the rising gas prices and the difficulties in the economy and inflation right now. I think people are kind of wising up to that.
Gosh, I would hope so. I know I've taken a lot of your time, but I want to go down one more road because it's a road that I've worked on. Like Obama's last executive order was to make sure that trans people who go to prison are jailed with their gender, the gender they identify with. Trump threw it out the first time. Biden didn't put it back in place. And now, as I read the news and look at things, they're forcing trans people to detransition in federal prisons. And I wonder if you know of anybody working specifically on that issue, if there's any bells we can ring, if we need to be doing. We're not working in that area specifically. We work with local law enforcement um, in safety and in making sure the hate crimes get reported. People are respected as they're being arrested or being helped, whichever it is. But that's one of the most inhumane things I can think of.
Yeah,
Do you
it
know
is.
anybody working in that area?
Mainly the legal orgs.
Yeah.
I know that Lambda, ACLU are big. Every time that this happens, I see a case from one of them. What I will say is that this is a devastating sort of thing that has been happening lately. I reported, for instance, in Florida, how they took all of the trans women there, they shaved their heads, and they started like giving them psychotropic medication to basically convert them from being trans. And we see this in prisons right now. They are basically running experimental conversion therapy treatments on transgender people who are incarcerated. And I want to make it clear, it's not hard to be incarcerated as a trans person. Like it's you can fall into incarceration pretty easy as a trans person, especially in many of these states now. You got a state like Idaho that just passed a ban on using the bathroom with a 5-year prison sentence. And like it's as easy as going to the bathroom twice right now in some of these states, and then you might end up in jail. So it's terrifying. It's cruel, it's unusual. And it seems like there's constantly court cases going back and forth on this issue. Um, It's
And
horrifying.
people are stuck in the middle experiencing
Yeah.
the
Yeah, experiencing the hurt. And honestly, like, I think a lot of incarcerated trans people, um, they don't get the attention or the sympathy that, uh, that they should be getting, in my opinion, because they deserve human rights just like anybody else
yeah,
does.
we have rules. These rules are being broken.
Exactly, exactly. We don't run medical experiments on prisoners. Like,
No.
that's just something that we
Period.
don't do.
Yeah. Period. Wow. I have a personal question for you, Erin. Like when we get your newsletter, there's many of us signed up in my office. It's like you can often set the tone of our day based upon the news that you and your team break. Um, you must be on all the time. I know you're called the publication's Erin in the morning, but are you thinking about changing that to Erin all day?
Right.
And and but, like, how do you Amy did some research. We know you love birds, and we're, like, watching you and your bird-loving ways and trying to figure out if you're in Maryland or Montana when you spotted that. So I know you do some pretty good personal care, and I'm sure you have to with this, but how do you personally, as a trans person, report on all these horrible, horrendous, actions against trans folks and maintain a level of sanity and joy?
That's a really, really, really good question. I will tell you that I run on, pure just, I have to do this. And hyperfixation is my superpower. And so I am able to focus on this work heavily. But what I will also say is that it has become even more important as this work has lasted so long and as there has been a need for it, for me to find the things that give me joy. One thing that my wife Zoe always says is that the some of the best things you can do to sort of give you a break and keep your mental health up, and this is not just for me, but for any of your listeners that work in this space or any advocacy space, is to find a hobby or a passion or a joy that has an end point, that has a finishing point. Because so much of this work can feel like you have to constantly work at it. And it's always you get an up and you get a down, and you get an up and you get a down, and it seems nonstop. Your wins are always temporary and your losses are always temporary. And doing something that has an endpoint is good. So for instance, for Zoe, she's over there right now painting D&D miniatures because that's one of her hobbies. And you know what? She can, whenever she's done, she can place that mini on the table and the governor can't come and veto it. The governor can't say no. And for me, I like hiking, I like backpacking, I like camping, and lately I like birds.
I
I like
love that.
looking at birds. You know what? If I see this rare warbler in a tree, I know that nobody is going to come and say, no, you didn't, and you can never see it again.
Yeah. I love that. Maybe you've explained why I love working in the yard so much. Like pulling
Yeah.
weeds for me, I did it this morning. You can tell from my fingernails before I came into the office because there is it like it's crossed off the list. It is
Yeah,
done.
exactly. You have an endpoint, you can look at it
Yeah.
and you can be happy. And I think that that's psychologically a good thing.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Are you a music person?
uh, I like listening to music,
Yeah.
yes.
Who you been listening to these days?
So lately, my entire family, so Zoe, myself, and our 10-year-old son have been listening to Epic the Musical. Don't know if you're familiar with
I
it,
am
but it
not.
is a concept album for a musical that has been gaining steam over the last few years. And they just announced that they are going to be making an animated series off of it. But I think that, and many people that have been following it think that it's going to end up on Broadway. It's basically
Wow.
a pre-Broadway full musical that's been released, and it's really, really good. It's a musical following Odysseus and the Odyssey.
What's the Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing that with me and the listeners. When I hired Bruce Parker, who's our executive director, the first year for a holiday, I gave him what's the Greek figure who pushes the ball up the hill and it rolls down every day?
Hold on, hold on, hold on. The person who pushes the ball up.
Prometheus?
No,
No.
that is Sisyphus.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what the work feels like to me. I'm like, Bruce,
Yes,
just like,
yes, it can
welcome to the
feel.
party, and this is what goes on every day. Uh,
Hence why I go look at birds and have things that finish.
I love that. I love that. And then we always like to ask. We had a Loke on, and we've had some other great people on the podcast, including yourself. The question we like to end with is, who's your queer icon? I know Zoe's in the room, and she may be that. But when you think about your queer icon, who do you think about?
It's funny. I have had the pleasure of meeting multiple queer icons, and it's been so wonderful to me. It's in my coming out letter. Whenever I first, Zoe's obviously my queer icon. She is my
Mhm.
wife, and I love her. In my coming out letter to my dad, I referenced Danica Rum, who I had just transitioned at the very beginning of her rise 7 years ago. And the idea was basically to my dad that, like, look at this, a trans person can achieve political office. Like, we can be something. Like, I can transition and still be something. And I referenced Danica in my letter. I've met Danica several times, and it's part of, I know her, and we know her well.
Was
But
she
yeah,
in
that was the first one that popped up
was
in
she
my
in
head.
Virginia?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
she was.
that's yeah,
Virginia.
it's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big deal, and, that's so exciting you've gotten to meet her
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
and hang out with her. Thanks for sharing that. I wanna, make sure our listeners know, well, I'm gonna say one other thing. I am so tired of the regular press, even the not the right-wing press. Like, turn on MSNBC. Like, I've been at the office all day reading your newsletter, know that all the hate that's coming, all the changes that are happening for a trans community, and not a peep is said in the news. You open the newspaper and nothing is said about what is happening to the trans community. And I'm not playing like the Special Olympics of prejudice, but you open the newspaper and the immigrant community. Now we work on immigrant issues under our Hands Off Colorado battle banner. We have No on 95, which would make our police complicit with ICE. So, and LGBT people are immigrants. I get that. There is no news about us. There is nothing, no one other than you pulling the alarm bell for the trans community. And I want to say thank you for that. And also, like, what the fuck?
Mhm.
Like, at what point does Rachel Maddow, for crying out loud, pick up a story and run a story about what is happening to the trans community? And as I work with a lot of young people. I'm the old dyke on the block. They're all talented in all their kind of ways and thinking about writing or like, one, why do you think the big picture is happening like that? And there isn't a push to change something. And number two, what would some advice be that you give to somebody young who's taking off on the journalistic adventure?
I was asked a question in the LGBTQ Journalists Association meeting 2 years ago. And it was a question about the New York Times coverage. And it was basically, what do you make? I think the question was something along the lines of, like, what do you make of both sidesism coverage of transgender issues, and like how we can overcome that, and like how that isn't the right way to report on things? And my answer was that both sides coverage of transgender issues would be an improvement. We aren't given our side. We're not even allowed to go there and to write on transgender topics. They don't give us that real estate. We don't give that space. We have to fight for that space every single day. And this isn't just at the New York Times. This is at basically all of our major papers. I yearn for the day that I don't have this job anymore. One day, whenever my work is made irrelevant, that will be when I have succeeded at what I do. The reason I have this job is because they are failing so dramatically at covering these issues. Clearly enough people are interested in it. I'm a top 20 writer on Substack right now. So it's like, you're not there's an audience out there that wants this information, that really wants this information, and just, like, let us write. God, please let us write. To young journalists, what I would say to them is, yes, try to get in with a major organization, with a major newspaper and stuff like that, but don't be afraid to just start writing yourself and to just start covering things yourself. That's how I got started. I never thought I would be a journalist. I was working like in advertising at the time, and I started tracking articles or tracking bills that were popping up, and I made a map of informed consent hormone therapy clinics 7 years ago, and I just found myself with a sudden following of people that were getting this information from me that they weren't getting anywhere else, and so I had to learn pretty quickly myself. I never dreamed I'd be where I am today on this.
Well, we're so glad you're there. Um, Listeners, please subscribe to Erin in the Morning on Substack. I would strongly suggest you subscribe. And in subscribing, you get some special content, but you also pay Erin and her other writers for the work. This is important work that requires resources to do it, just like the important work that's required for a clinic to stand up. So please go, we'll put it in the show notes. Please go to Erin in the Morning on Substack and subscribe, and to make sure you subscribe with a paying edition. I want to thank you so much. I was nervous all day just thinking about meeting with you. I'm fangirling with tears in my eyes because the work you do is saving a lot of lives and allowing organizations like Rocky Mountain Equality to make the next right move. So thank you very much for joining today, Erin.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Proudly Out of Line is brought to you by Rocky Mountain Equality, with help from your host, Mardi Moore, executive producer, Amy Zuckerman, audio producer, Theo Conover. Until next time.